You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show. Now that that's squared away, let's start the show. Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz, have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. Hello, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. I'm glad to have you listening in today. We're doing this special show today with Doug Casey from the Casey Research Center. He's going to tell us all about all of his work he's doing. He's broadcasting to us from Argentina, but first, because this is such an international show, we have Josh coming to us from Berlin. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Hey, Tatiana, I'm just doing swell, I must say. It's seeing crypto going above 4,000 and gold is also doing well, and loving seeing a lot of these projects that are helping people out in Venezuela as well, which is really, really good to see. I saw a great project down that way, which is fantastic to see.
Cool. Well, maybe Doug, he can give us a little bit of an insight into that. I just wanted to make sure that we said thank you to one of our sponsors. We're going to be giving you a little bit more word about them. But Salt Lending has been kind enough to support the Tatiana Show. We're really excited to have them. I've been friends with the team for a long time, and it's a great way to turn your crypto into a loan. Kind of neat. So we'll hear a little bit more about that, Salt Lending. So thank you for supporting the Tatiana Show. Anything that we want to get to before we start talking to Doug, Josh?
Man, it's not every day you get to talk to such a legend. So I'd love to just get straight onto Doug Casey.
All right, let's get this party started. Awesome. Thanks, Doug Casey, for joining us today.
And it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to both of you guys.
Yeah, I appreciate you making the time. So for people who are not familiar with your work, we are talking about this off the air. Could you give a little bit of a background on what you're doing with your center and any other kind of work that you've been doing? Because it's been quite extensive over the years.
Well, the first book that I wrote was The International Man. It was quite a while ago, 1977 or 8. And that was a guidebook to the world's countries, how to make the most of your personal freedom and financial opportunity. And it did very well. Among other things, it became the largest selling book in the history of Rhodesia, which is a record that's never going to be broken at this point. And my next book was Crisis Investing. It was written in 78, published in 79, and it talked about your profits and opportunities in the coming Great Depression. Or I should say Greater Depression, I coined that phrase. And that was on the New York Times list for 38 weeks, number one for 18 weeks in 1980 and 81. Then I did strategic investing. And in 1982, Simon & Schuster gave me a large advance, $800,000. Not much, well, it's still a lot of money today, but it was quite a bit more back then, more like 3 million today. And then crisis investing. So anyway, then I've published a newsletter since then and been living around the world and written a couple of novels with John Hunt, Speculator, and tracing our hero, Charles Knight, as he progresses through life, first being a speculator, getting involved in a bush war in Africa, and then drug lord, where he becomes a drug lord. We're trying to show that these politically incorrect occupations can be engaged in by a very good guy. And you can be a good guy as a speculator, a drug lord, And just when you called, I was putting the finishing touches on Assassin, which is the third in the series, because Charles figures there are just some people that need killing. And the books get more radical from here. So that's what I've been up. That's what I've been up to.
That sounds like quite a lot. Let me ask you, is it something that on purpose you set out thinking, I want to create some fiction that has a libertarian protagonist? How did that work? I mean, were you conscientious with that effort? Have you noticed maybe a trend otherwise in popular media?
Yeah, well, there's no question about the fact that that Hollywood and the mass media, colleges, academia, all the politics, they've been totally captured. Those big corporations, they're totally captured by the bad guys, by the socialists, by the anti-freedom people. At this, I realize that it's a Sisyphean effort trying to counter these things, but I'm doing it for my own gratification and amusement, not because I expect to change the world. I'm afraid that libertarians such as us, we're genetic mutants. We're not even a rounding error when it comes to humanity at large. So I think that's wise to keep in mind. And all of the governments of the world are headed in the wrong direction. It makes me quite pessimistic about the intermediate future for humanity in general. But I'm here in Northwest Argentina, where the weather's beautiful, the food is excellent, cost of living is low, standard of living is extremely high, if you have dollars. And I feel relatively insulated from the bad stuff that's going to be happening, especially in the US. I think we're on the cusp of a civil war.
Do you think that Latin America is more prepared to handle it? I've thought about different places to run away to, and one of the places I've considered is Argentina, because it's so fabulous there, obviously. One of the thoughts that somebody had suggested to me that resonated was the idea that, well, at least they know what it's like when your money goes belly up, because they're sort of used to that in the region. Do you have safety concerns being in Argentina, since it does have such an unstable financial system?
There are no perfect places in the world, maybe not even any great places, but I've been to something like 155 countries. I don't know, that's the last time I looked, a few years ago. And I've lived in 10 different countries. And I could tell you why I wound up here in Argentina and also in Uruguay. It's a small neighbor across the Plate River. How can I explain this? Look, Argentina used to be, 100 years ago, one of the 3 or 4 wealthiest countries in the world. And if you were a European looking to bail out from that sinking ship, you probably thought of either the US or Argentina. Now, Argentina's descended a lot since those days, but I still recommend it quite highly. But I've got to say that every country in the world is going in the wrong direction. We're headed for something really ugly in the future. To answer your question, I think you're much better off here in Argentina than you would be in the US. That's the short and sweet part of it.
Yeah, I'm definitely starting to pick up more and more as we're seeing, the Trump administration getting in. I'm starting to see a lot more socialist fervor coming from the progressive side, to the point where they're saying we want free education now, we want free healthcare, and these are all great honeypots. Everyone wants, oh wow, free healthcare, how great. But not being economically minded, they don't really see the unseen, in which we talk about a lot in anarcho-capitalist circles or libertarian circles. And it really reminds me of the joke, what did socialists do before they used candles for light? Electricity. And sort of it reminds me a lot of that, because I feel that a lot of the time a lot of progressives, meaning the word meaning moving forward, is actually moving backwards.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, of course. One comment I've got to make, because one thing that these people have been very effective at doing is capturing the language. And they can control the conversation by controlling the language. I never say healthcare. They say they want healthcare, but it's a mistake to use their language. It's medical care. Healthcare is something you provide for yourself. But they like to use that because they think if people use healthcare, they actually think that it's going to improve their health. And so they really want to vote for it. Medical care scares people. So they don't want to say that. Everybody wants health. Nobody wants medicine, so to speak. Anyway, but it's worse than you mentioned, Josh, because they now want a guaranteed annual income of about $1,000 a month. So that's the next thing on the plate.
So I'm thinking that you don't think that UBI is a good idea. There's this guy, Andrew Yang in the US, who's stating that he would give everybody, I think, at least $1,000 a month. That would be his platform. I've heard a few different libertarians, like a smattering of different articles arguing for it, but for our listeners who are not really familiar with why that wouldn't necessarily work, because it sounds pretty good on the surface. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, look, these people aren't stupid. They're actually quite smart because they know what appeals to the average chimpanzee out there who does not think, who only feels. And he knows that it would feel good to have $1,000 a month coming in, and then you wouldn't have to work, among other things. These people aren't stupid, but they are crazy. Actually, I think they're criminally insane. Proposing these things. There's no question that it won't work. It's just filtering ever more power to the government. And to get the goods, forget about the $1,000 a month. There's something out there that's being widely promoted now called modern monetary theory, which basically states the government should just print up all the money it needs to buy what it wants. And this is gaining currency also. These people are actually completely insane. But you shouldn't think about these things in terms of dollars. Dollars are kind of an abstract thing now, since they're not redeemable by the issuer with anything in particular. Think of it as being goods and services. So these people want to give everybody $1,000 a month of goods and services, of food and gasoline and utilities and who's going to provide these things if these other people are being given it and not producing anything in return? That's the way to look at it. Stop thinking about dollars, which are just a floating abstraction anyway. No, it's an insane idea. It's so stupid that it really doesn't even merit talking about, but they're talking about it, so I guess we have to too.
Yeah, it's definitely on the cards. We're seeing a lot more people mentioning UBI like it's a new concept, but really it basically is a socialist or communist construct. There really isn't any other thing. But, I do see that there are economic things that are happening economically which are quite scary. For instance, 6 million jobs, driving jobs, disappearing through the roboticization of cars or the AI invention of self-driving cars. And this really puts people on edge and thinks, wow, what are 6 million people going to do in the States alone, let alone globally?
It's not only a non-problem, which it is, it's a non-problem, it's a good thing. Driving cars and driving trucks, which are also on their way to the scrap heap of history, that's dog work. IBM used to have a motto, I don't know if it still does, machines should work, people should think. So just as at the start of the Industrial Revolution, everybody was saying, these terrible industrialists, they're producing cloth so quickly and cheaply, and all the people working in their cottage industries with looms, working 16 hours a day, they were all unemployed. But it was a wonderful thing. So this is a wonderful thing too. The only problem that I have with self-driving vehicles is that they'll be able to be centrally controlled. They'll know where you are at every time. They can stop and start your vehicle. They can lock you in your vehicle. They can have your vehicle take you someplace you don't want to go. This is the real problem. It comes down to personal freedom more than anything else. From a strictly economic point of view, it's fantastic. It's wonderful.
But isn't it sort of inevitable that we're giving away our freedoms at this point? I mean, with the internet, we've got the surveillance state. With Bitcoin, we have potentially controlled money. I think overall the net positive is coming down the pipe. What do you think about Bitcoin? Are you a fan? I'm sure you're obviously a fan of cryptocurrencies, but do you have anything to say about the potential for impact there? Do you think that will be something that can be controlled, or do you think that, for example, with like a state enforced currency, or how do you feel that revolution is going to pan out?
Yeah, well, the whole cryptocurrency thing is a double-edged sword. Now, I was a late adopter of it. I only finally twigged, in my mind, the real value of Bitcoin when I went to, as a speaker in a conference in Aspen, where I lived during the northern summer.
I was at that conference.
Yeah,
the
you
Nexus
were there.
Conference. That was a fun conference. Cool. We
Yes.
were there. Lynn Albrecht was also there. Free Roth.
Right. Okay, good, Tatiana, you're right. And it was only there that it finally occurred to me, wait a minute, Bitcoin is a transfer mechanism. 75% of the people on this planet live in countries with blocked currencies like kwachas and pulas and dirhams and crap currencies like that are absolutely worthless outside of the country that issues them. And Bitcoin internationalizes us. And also Bitcoin makes it possible to not use the banking system and the central banks and all this type of thing. So I got into Bitcoin when it was about $6,000 then, and so I was a late adopter. But I put $100,000 into it and wrote it up. Sold it in January. I figured that the bubble was breaking, and took my 100 out plus 50 a profit, and left the remainder in various cryptocurrencies, which have melted down pretty much. But my feeling is that there are a lot of new cryptos that are coming out that are have peculiar uses that I think the bubble is going to reinflate. And there are a number of reasons why that's going to happen. But I think that some of these things have the potential of going 100 to 1 or better. So I'm loaded for bear this time around. Not buying quite yet, but getting ready to pull the trigger.
So coming from the libertarian background, and I'm sure you're an old gold bug and silver bug, where do you see that playing out in a crypto future? Now we have rare numbers as well as rare metals, and these numbers can be absolutely guaranteed not to go over a certain amount of issuance as a predefined number. And gold is still very, very much part of the hearts and minds of people. I'd be interested to know your take on the future of gold now that cryptocurrency is around.
What's going to happen, and is happening as we speak, is that major governments in the world are going back to the gold standard. Why? The Chinese and the Russians are the two leaders in this, but the Iranians are following along. There are other countries. Right now, if you settle internationally, you settle them with dollars. That means those dollars have to be transferred through New York, and they absolutely don't want to use the currency of their enemy, where the Americans know what they're doing and can stop it if they want, as they have for the Iranians, among others. And they don't trust each other, and they don't trust each other's crap currencies. So they're building their gold reserves, and they're going to go back to gold. Gold is going to become the international money again. Now, that's the bright side. On the other hand, the retail world, the world of the capitacency, the hoi polloi, it's going towards digital currencies, which are a disaster because they're basically centrally controlled. Everybody's going to have to use their iPhone or something, and it'll be just like a remotely drivable car. If what you're using is not $100 bills, but digital currency, the government can confiscate your account, can stop it the way they can stop your credit cards. You have zero privacy as far as what's going to happen. I'm talking about the currency that the government will want you to use, FedCoin, if you would. So this is the way it's going, just like the social credit system in China is a total and complete disaster from the point of view of personal freedom, but it's being adopted in China at warp speed and will be in the US as well.
You really think that something like what's going on in China is going to occur in the US? Because I think a lot about that. I mean, you know, when one realizes how rigged the election process is, you sort of kind of disconnect. But the world is marching onward toward 1984, and all of a sudden you see headlines for something like China. Do you really think that the US is going to adopt that? How do you feel about this presidency? Do you think the presidency matters? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, the US is in process of informally adopting it right now because you've got these three major credit agencies, Experian and whatever the hell the name of the other two are, TransUnion, I forget the third one. And apparently, a lot of millennials are competing with each other for their high credit scores. This is exactly what the Chinese are doing, but it goes far beyond just credit. You're familiar with the social credit score that they're using in China, correct, Tatiana?
Yes, I'm familiar with it, but I mean, just in case, if you want to like quickly go through it for our audience who maybe hasn't had a chance to look it up. It's pretty known, but just in case.
Yeah, it's recent, but it's very scary. Basically, you will be rated based upon what you say. You'll have points added or subtracted. What you do, if you jaywalk, if you get a traffic ticket, points added, subtracted. People that you associate with, if they have bad scores, your score goes down. So you're going to disconnect with them. It's going to have a huge influence on everything from whether or not you can get a mortgage to whether or not you can get on a plane.
It's like a horror movie. I mean, literally like a horror movie. I can't even imagine something so wretched. And, you know, the Chinese government is already so scary. You know, I've heard that when you go to Tiananmen Square, when you're getting a tour, you're not allowed to ask your tour guide about what went on until when you're not there because they all pretend nothing happened. I mean, this is like a complete other world, but it's not that far away.
No, it's happening all over the world. And surprisingly, your average chimpanzee really likes the idea. He feels that it's like getting frequent flyer points on an airline, which are basically a scam. I mean, I've got hundreds of thousands of the damn things. No, so the average person likes this because the average person doesn't have a clue about economics or the principles of freedom or whatever.
No, they certainly don't. And do you think that, you know, I don't know, what do you think is happening in terms of people figuring things out? Because there is a huge push for socialism to be the most popular thing, especially among the youth. But there is a rising tide of people that are basically pushing back because it's almost cool now to be counterculture in that way, right? So to be against the tide would be a little bit more libertarianish. Do you think that's going to continue to be a trend? Because at the same time, you've got a very hard push for morality only being seen from this one perspective. You know, I mean, there's a lot of thought control going on. That's why I like the idea of using fiction to convey some of these ideas.
You know, it's going to become increasingly dangerous and inconvenient to be an anarcho-capitalist in the future as the social credit system takes over. And I'm not sure I know where to hide. You know, these novels that John Hunt and I are writing, they're actually pretty outrageous, starting on a gradient where our hero is just a just a speculator gets involved in a mining deal in Africa, finds out it's a fraud. He winds up starting with basically nothing, makes $200 million. And then he does the same thing in the drug business again. And we explain how these businesses work and how you make the money and all this type of stuff. And the same thing with in Assassin, where cryptocurrencies are, or a cryptocurrency called the Paladin coin, is an essential part of this, where people are compensated for monitoring government officials, and it gives great value to this particular coin, because if you deliver information that's requested or required, you're paid in it, and then it works the way the cryptocurrencies work, and it's completely private. So it's basically an assassination network, which could be built up. So it's going to be a very politically incorrect book. Will I get into trouble for writing the book? Well, I don't know. It's fiction, so you can still say whatever you want in the form disguised as the form of fiction. That's the nice thing about fiction. You can say things that you really wouldn't dare, or perhaps you'd better not say in nonfiction. So that's why we're doing it that way. Also, because there are a lot of people that like to ingest information in the form of a story, an adventure story, that wouldn't read a didactic explanation in nonfiction form. So that's the way I'm going. But these novels are being quite successful, actually, from a monetary point of view. But I'm basically doing it for my own gratification, not for the money. But money's good, because you want all the money you can, so that as life extension technologies develop fully, which they will over the next 20 years, rich people will get them first and get them best. So you want to have as much money as you can.
What do you know about life extension? I'm very interested in this. I don't want to die. I'd like to live for a long time, but I'd like to live in a youthful body. So have you looked into this more seriously, or is this sort of just broadly, this is coming?
Well, no, I've been involved in this, at least peripherally, for many years. Perhaps you know who Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw are.
No, fill us in.
All right, well, I'll tell you then. Because regrettably, I'm 72 goddamn years old, and the world marches on. Dirk and Sandy are about my age. They wrote a book that was also a #1 bestseller shortly after mine was, called Life Extension, A Practical Scientific Approach. The book is about 800 pages, and it's scientific, but it was a #1 New York Times bestseller. So, I've followed this over the years, and I still follow it now, both because I've always been something of a boy scientist. So I still read about these things, and I do things. It's still in its baby stages, but like all technologies, it's advancing at the rate of Moore's Law. And I could talk about how actually Moore's Law has actually been in effect since anatomically modern humans came on the scene 200,000 years or so ago. Moore's Law has been with us a long time. But we've only noticed Moore's Law since the 60s, when Moore formulated the concept. And one of these areas where things are advancing at that rate is the whole area of life extension and bioengineering and genetics and all the rest of it. So the chances are, if you can hold on another 20 years, you may be able to live for a very, very long period of time. And not as an old person. Nobody wants to be an old person. That's a drag. I'm hoping that I can reconstitute my body. And I'll go for Bruce Jenner just before he won the decathlon.
I think that's a good goal. Unusual,
that is a very good goal.
Unusual choice, but good figure at that point.
I totally agree, though, that everything seems to be speeding up in terms of fixing people and their bodies, especially in the genetic side of things and reading DNA and repairing DNA. It's really moving forward fast. And the whole Moore's Law thing, people find it very hard to comprehend exponentiality. But this is what Ray Kurzweil talks about when he talks about everything just starting to come into one spot. What do they call it? The singularity, where it becomes so fast, everything moves so fast and evolves so quickly that it just becomes the singularity. So,
what if there's a big financial collapse? Will this research continue? I think that there will still be vain people that don't want to die. I mean, that's a really, really popular thing that people are into, right? They like good skin creams and basically anti-aging stuff will survive. But if there's a big global collapse, what do you guys think will happen? Is that going to delay? Because I'd like to, lock this up soon.
You got to approach this two ways. On the one hand, science is becoming much more expensive with the capital costs. It's not like in the days of Isaac Newton, where you could formulate theories with an apple and such. Now big science is multi-billion-dollar stuff, so you need capital. And if the world turns truly socialist, it's going to destroy a huge amount of capital. And it won't, but on the other hand, things like CRISPR are very cheap, and you can do biology the way Steve Jobs did computers in your garage or your basement. So cause for optimism, cause for pessimism.
Yeah, interesting. Definitely. The CRISPR is a fascinating technology. And I saw even there was a boy, I don't know, all of like 23, biohacking himself in the basement with different...
Wait, what's a CRISPR?
It's a technology where you can splice DNA very, very easily and basically take out bad genes, put in other genes, all sorts of stuff.
That sounds horrifying. Are you kidding me? That sounds like some Jurassic Park nightmare.
What's wrong
within like a month? I mean, that doesn't even seem far out there. Are you kidding me? This sounds terrible.
What's wrong with Jurassic Park? I think it'd be wonderful to bring the dinosaurs back.
I mean, I can think of a few people I wouldn't mind, having them dinosaur sit, but I mean, generally, no, I don't think that would be good. I don't think messing around with genes is a good to keep us alive, but shoot, maybe we need to do this in order to keep ourselves alive longer.
Tatiana, I've got to say that's a bit of a Luddite opinion that you're.
Sometimes you got to be a Luddite. What can I say?
Well, if you want to live a long time, a very long time, and not get old, the only thing that's going to save you from that fate is technology and science. And at this point, I don't think there's much question that the answer lies in genetic engineering. It's vitamins and such are just not going to cut it.
Oh my gosh, I have to have my mind changed so often on this show. Fine, I accepted the incoming Jurassic Park.
Yeah, that's so true. It's always this double-edged sword. As technology moves forward, we tend to also forget how to do things. So we also de-evolve, I think, though, because, for instance, if you start a fire, we used to know how to make fire. But now that we have these matches and lighters, no one knows how to make fire outside of camping freaks, or people in the army. You forget that and you become totally dumb if you're dumped out in the forest. So it's this sort of two-edged sword.
That's an excellent point, Josh. That is so true. At this point, because of technology, we've really become very over-specialized. And if the technology breaks down and civilization collapses, which is entirely possible if they start World War III or something resembling it, most people are going to die like flies. Yeah, you're quite correct.
Yeah, but I think, after we saw the collapse of the USSR and such, I mean, living here in Berlin, there are a lot of very wealthy Russians. There just are. And it's kind of interesting when you see the collapses of these certain things or certain bad things happen in economies, you see still a lot of people escaping with a lot of wealth. So even if there is a massive destruction, I think we will have people with a lot of wealth still around. So that's why it's good to protect your wealth while making it in the good times.
Well, that's absolutely right. And protecting it is not the easiest thing in the world. I wrote this book, International Man, a long time ago, and the world has changed since then. So I'm actually going to redo that book in the next year or two and bring it up to date. But in the meantime, I want to direct listeners to internationalman.com, which is the website where we have lots of articles on how you solve this exact problem that you just mentioned.
How to make fire?
No, not quite that basic. Although interestingly, I was a Boy Scout for years and stopped one merit badge short of becoming an Eagle Scout, which I feel bad about even today. So I like that type of thing. But no, we don't talk about that so much on internationalman.com. We talk about the financial equivalence of that, if you would.
Funnily enough, I was in the Boy Scouts, in the Sea Scouts when I was a kid. It was great. We always went sailing and all sorts of stuff. Very, very cool. But they actually had to invent the computer badge for me. I programmed this thing, and they didn't have a computer badge. I said, I want a computer badge, and they made one. So I don't know if I was the first to have a computer badge in the Scouts or not.
That's very interesting. Of course, I'm not sure that the Boy Scouts are what they used to be either. It's like so many organizations. It's the second law of thermodynamics in action. As things get older, they become corrupt and soft, and they wind down. And that's happening to the Boy Scouts at this point.
Hey guys, let's hold off on that for just 1 second and take a second to thank one of our sponsors. I know we've been talking for a little while. I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned Salt. Salt Lending is pioneering ways for you to grow your business using your crypto holdings. We've all heard people say Bitcoin and other digital currencies can't support actual business. Salt is telling those same people to get real. A crypto-backed cash loan from Salt can turn possibility into reality by covering operating costs or funding expansion. Don't let them tell you what your crypto can and can't do for your business. Go to saltlending.com/Tatiana and see for yourself how Salt can help. That's saltlending.com/Tatiana. I also recommend people check out, I did an interview before they became a sponsor with Caleb over at the Salt team. It's like a 10-minute thing. I ask him some questions. So if you're hodling, it's definitely an option to consider. So check it out. Go to saltlending.com/Tatiana.
Yeah, I think Salt's really cool like that, Tatiana. I like it because it allows you to hold your crypto and not sell it, but get cash for it. And if the price is on the right way and you don't get margin called, then it's all good to go and you've still got your crypto. And if it goes down, then you've got they have to sell it, but you were going to sell it anyway. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, is it a lending thing? I'm not familiar with the company. Do you lend your cryptos and you get interest on them? Is that the way it works?
That's right. People can, I'm not sure about them, but a lot of these crypto lending things are really interesting, and Salt doing a good job. I think on one side you can lend your crypto, on the other side you can borrow it. You can get cash. I think it's an over-collateralized loan. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, with Salt, you give them cryptos and then they give you a loan. They don't do the thing the other direction. Other companies do the other direction. We could talk about it some more and ask them some questions. I don't want to mislead people because, first of all, I'm not giving them financial advice because I'm certainly not qualified. But also, I don't want to make a mistake. So people go to the website, they could figure it out. But from what I understand, if I wanted to, let's say, make a $10,000 loan, I would put in $20,000 worth of crypto, and then they'd give me 10 grand. And then that would be the loan. I think that's how it works. I don't know.
Yeah. And once you paid it back, you get your 20 grand worth of Bitcoin back. And if it drops below that value, then they have to call it and sell it. And, you had to sell it anyway if you didn't do it that way.
Yeah, I was thinking we could do a walkthrough of it at some point because I think it's scary when you're trying to do a loan. I mean, I've never even done a loan in the real world, but I do hodl and I've thought about it a bunch of times. So it might be something fun to try out and see if other people want to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, I've also heard it's good because
never touch our cryptos. Just put them in a safe place and just wait.
Well, I don't know. I think you should either spend them or use them. I mean, I definitely like the idea of spending crypto. It's just I would rebuy it on the other side. So, turn any bad money to good.
You've got to be careful with these things, because gold bugs have this attitude when they get into junior mining stocks. They call them penny dreadfuls in Australia, as you know. And, they think, well, gold's going up. Therefore, I'll become a billionaire holding on to these crappy little mining stocks. They hodl them. And basically, they wind up losing 100% of everything. So you've got to be careful with these things.
Yeah, there's no point being a billionaire if you have to add, 9 zeros to the currency that has to be used.
How much advice do you guys give people?
How much what?
How much advice do you guys give people specifically on different cryptocurrency? I mean, or is it more just broad advice about how to have the most free life that you can? Or do you ever get involved saying, oh, I like Dash, or, I like Monero, or something like that?
Right. Marco Witzer. Do you know him by any chance?
Not offhand, but we certainly may have met before, and I just don't remember at the time.
Okay. Well, I met Marco 10 years ago in Paraguay. He's a German, and he's something of a genius. And he was in cryptos a long, long time ago. And he writes a letter for us where he's very specific on the new cryptos that have very interesting uses and prices and when to buy and sell them. And it's actually quite fascinating. I don't feel competent personally to talk about these details, but Marco is. So we have a letter at Casey Research that I think is excellent. I read it and I follow its advice personally.
Yeah, how long's that your newsletter been going out for, Doug?
Well, I do a weekly interview in the form of a blog at caseyresearch.com every Friday. And I've been writing a newsletter since 1979. I used to do it monthly. Now I just do the Friday blog at caseyresearch.com. But that's what I do. But we have guys like Nick Giambruno, who covers the international scene, and guys like Dave Forrest that covers the mining scene, which has always been a specialty of mine, because these junior mining stocks have treated me very well over the years. They're very dangerous, highly, highly volatile, most volatile stocks on the planet, but they've been very good to me. So we have a lot of things that we do.
Yeah, fantastic. We at Voltura, my exchange is Voltura.com, and we allow people to trade Bitcoin into physical allocated bullion and then be able to trade back into crypto so the full order book, and people trade all day long on that. I think it's a really interesting use case because gold is in the history of every country, really. Are you guys still hot on gold in terms of what do you recommend people with gold these days?
Well, look, first of all, gold is not an investment. An investment is something that you put the capital someplace and it grows because it's being used productively. Gold is not an investment. It is money. And occasionally it can be an excellent speculation. Now, to answer the question, right now, let's say it's $1,300. I think that we're starting a new bull market. Gold has been basically, all commodities have been in a steep bear market since the last peak, which was 2011. Gold a little bit later, but I think gold is a fantastic place to put your money away to preserve capital, which is very important. Most people in a depression, most people lose capital. They lose wealth. So this is a good reason to own a lot of physical gold, but it's also a good speculation right now. I think it's at the very, very beginning of a new bull market trend. I don't know how high it'll take it. Also, it's also a good time if you want to really speculate to look at these crappy little junior mining stocks, which are very, very cheap. In real terms, about as cheap as they've ever been, and people are as uninterested in them as they've ever been, which is a very good thing. So
that's very, very true. I gave a talk at the Gold Consortium in Perth, and it was in Sydney. Next year it's in Melbourne. And I got to say, the first year I went there, which was 2 years ago, it was almost empty. It was really like, compared to some of the crypto conferences, this really didn't have much interest. And there was a lot of miners that were really looking for investment, a lot of solid projects. And the technology these days to basically scout these mines, these potential mines, are very, very good. They've become better and better. So it's definitely, I totally concur that it's a good thing to look into.
Yeah, so other than real estate in various places in the world, my main focus is commodities, commodity-related stocks, and soon some of these newer cryptocurrencies. So that's where I'm looking at the moment, basically. Because the whole world, you've got to remember, is in a gigantic financial bubble. It's not just, in fact, the bond market, which is the biggest of the markets, isn't just in a bubble, it's in a hyper bubble. It's going to be a catastrophe as interest rates go up, which they have to do for the sake of the economy. But there's so much debt in the world, it's going to melt down. The stock market, very overpriced. Real estate floats on a sea of debt. There's a lot of risk in the world right now. There's going to be a lot of really unhappy campers in the next few years as we go into the trailing edge of this gigantic financial hurricane that we entered upon in 2007. So the chimpanzees will be out in the streets rioting, and it's going to have political consequences. I think the progressives, so-called, are going to win in 2020 in the US. It's going to have military consequences. There are immense demographic things happening all over the world that are going to change the whole character of the life on the planet, even if nothing else does. Interesting time.
Well, what places do you think, other than Argentina, are good places for people to prepare if they have to physically leave?
I like Argentina, just to explain that a little bit better, because most people don't understand how I could like a country with a bad reputation like this. It's only got 40 million people, but it's the 7th largest country in the world. And most of those people are around Buenos Aires. So once you get out of Buenos Aires, it is like empty. And that's wonderful. I mean, me and a couple of friends bought 50,000 hectares, which is to say, what is that, 125,000 acres? I don't know, a few years ago. And that's all empty, but beautiful. So you can do that kind of thing in Argentina. Where else to go? Backward little socialist country is Uruguay, but I like it. It's peaceful, only 4 million people.
So you're mentioning socialist countries, which obviously I don't think any of us here think socialism is so great. Is it because they're just so screwed up that you can grease your way around relatively cheaply enough to make it less annoying?
That is one of the reasons why I like South America. That's quite correct. Now, I lived in New Zealand for years, and I liked New Zealand for many reasons. But New Zealand is a high trust society, generally speaking. There's relatively little corruption there. And in a country with lots of laws, the only thing that saves your ass is corruption. Corruption can be a very good thing. And you've got to realize that in all of these countries, all over the world, all of them are passing more laws every day. That's what their congresses and parliaments, and that's what they do. They pass laws. And all those laws restrict your freedom. So you want corruption. It's the only thing that saves you from these things. That's another reason to have some spare change in your jeans.
Yeah, that's a really interesting comment. And I guess from everything that I read online about you and read is that you still are very fond of anarcho-capitalism. And I love...
For a long time.
Yeah, fantastic. And I really love the concepts behind anarcho-capitalism. And a lot of the questions I get asked constantly are, how would police work? Or how would the courts work? And I'd love to ask you that question. How do you think, I know that, we don't know all the answers, otherwise we'd be a dictatorship, but in terms of what you think might happen as a writer of fiction, I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, I was actually converted to anarcho-capitalism when I read a book. I was on a 3-month treasure hunting expedition, actually. That's the fact of the matter, in 1971. And I took this little book along with me called The Market for Liberty. It was a samizdat version. It was only published 500 copies, nothing. And I read it, and it was so clear and logical and well written that I realized that being a libertarian wasn't nearly good enough. So I recommend everybody read The Market for Liberty. It's free online, or you can get it through Amazon and paper if you want. But it's a small work of genius. It was so good that with one friend of mine here in Argentina, in the south of the country, in Patagonia, we always used to discuss politics. And Jorge wasn't convinced. So I gave him a copy in English of The Market for Liberty. He read it. He loved it so much it changed his life, as it did mine. He had it translated into Spanish. So now it's circulating here in Argentina. So
wonderful.
We're like salmon swimming upstream. We're not going to convert the world. Most people have far, far too many psychological aberrations. They don't think. But still, I feel it's good karma to get the word out there. And the answers to those questions you asked, Josh, best people, we could discuss them, of course. But the answers are all in that book, very well explained.
Yeah,
Short,
wonderful.
150 pages.
Oh, wow. Is that all?
That's all. And they'll be explained, and they're explained in my novels, too. A lot of these details will be explained when I get to Warlord, where our hero, Charles, takes a shithole country in Africa and transforms it into Hong Kong on steroids in a decade using anarcho-capitalist principles. That's my hobby, you know. It's going to backward countries and talking to preferably the military dictator and telling him how he can become loved and legitimately wealthy and world famous, as opposed to infamous.
By letting go.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that sounds like a good place to break. If people want to read these stories, one more time, Doug, where can they go online to connect with you?
Well, they can go to kcresearch.com, where I do an interview every Friday in our free blog. They can go to internationalman.com, where we do lots of stuff. That should be one of the first stops. And last, they can go to highgroundbooks.com, where they can get a copy of these novels, as well as Amazon. So those are the points of reference.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope I see you. Maybe I'll go to Freedom Fest this year. I'm not sure. Usually Lynn Ulbricht and I are traveling, and we've always got an eye out for you. Always cracking up the room. Thanks, Doug, so much for joining us today. Thanks again to our sponsor, Salt. Make sure you also check out the bitcoincpa.com. Kirk's doing all sorts of good stuff around taxes, which, you know, if you want to not go to jail, that's what you got to do, I guess. But he also did an episode with us about what to do in order to prevent your SIM card from being stolen. So look at thetatianashow.com. Look for that episode. Check out the Salt episode with Caleb Slade. There's a bunch of new stuff on there. Go to proofoflovecast.com for my new relationship podcast. And any parting words, Josh?
No, but yeah, thank you very much, Casey, for being on. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about these concepts and ideas.
All right.
Well,
Yeah.
it was mine.
Thanks, Tatiana.
Thanks, everyone. Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond.